Great. So, hi, Tom. Hi, Sean. Hi, everybody watching from home, from your office. It's a pleasure to have you all with us. Today's topic is how artificial intelligence, predictive analytics can disrupt the real estate sector. And just before we start, as a brief introduction, we wanted to stress that even though we're talking about predictive analytics for real estate today, the capabilities that we're talking about could be applicable to any other sector. So the knowledge and the expertise is there to apply to other instances other than real estate. And also, even though we're going to talk about a specific product that TKI has developed, which is called Nscope, there is also the capability of developing other solutions, custom solutions for any company, a real estate company, or other sector company that could that might need predictive analytics. I don't know, Tom, Sean, hi. I don't know if you want to add anything to add to this before we start.
Hi, and thank you for having us. Not too much to add, but I think I do agree and want to stress on the fact that it is a good example of what's possible, so it doesn't have to be limited into the scope that we're actually looking at today, but you kind of take a look at it as what can you do with data is the big question, right? And there's oftentimes you use the term visualization, which is very important. We're actually going to show some of that today, not in the application, but in our reporting tool. And then, once you have all that data, what can you do with algorithms, predict or forecast or things of that nature? So there's some good topics to keep in mind.
Good. And maybe let's start with the basics. What is it that a real estate company might need or the sector might need that could be a pain, let's say, that could be resolved with analytics? And what kind of analytics are we talking about? What data are we talking about?
So what we're going to look at today and what the kind of need is, right, is that if you, let's pair it back to basically if you look at a property, if you think about when that property goes on the market, so it becomes for sale, who would be interested in that? Well, certainly real estate agents, which we're going to talk a little bit about today, but it goes further than that, right? Because essentially you could have that home is likely going to need a mortgage, both for the people buying it and for the people leaving it. You could now have a new home buyer, so you could extend it to home services, technology services, smart services, all the way down to potentially credit cards, if you really want to extend it very far, right? Because there's a statistic that states that within 6 months of purchasing a home, at least in the United States, the average spend is about $15,000 per person within the first 6 months. So that's really the high level need. We're going to focus because it's very simple and easy to look at a real estate, but it can apply to any brand. And then you get into what data. So the data that we used, we have a series of data sources that we use. There's some common ones, which is basically I got to build a universe of how many properties exist in the United States. And these are this particular application is residential, by the way. So we built a universe of all the homes, and these are things like files that we would get from a tax assessor, or when someone registers a deed or mortgage or things of that nature. We then go further and we buy demographic data. So some of this has a little bit of a different view in the EU and other areas because of the privacy, but as long as it's anonymous, we have more data here that you'll see than what will be allowed there. But we build a picture of who lives in that home. So you have really 3 areas of data that we want to look at. It's the home itself, so the physical structure, how old is it, the taxes, how big, things like that. The next one would be the members. So who lives there and what do they look like? What is their profile? Are they a young couple? Are they retiree? Do they have kids? How old? How much money do they make? That would be something, again, here we would probably have that you wouldn't. But these things are very important. And then the last one is the neighborhood that home resides in, and what do those people look like? So it's not to say that if I'm adjacent or opposite to the neighborhood, I'm going to move. It's not about that. It's about being able to feed an algorithm or series of algorithms information so that it can do things with that information. So that's really the big idea. The need is I want to know and get ahead of. I want to get a prediction of a home that's going to come on the market so that I can market that home with my services before it gets there, because it takes a while to start that conversation.
Okay, I understand. And in terms of, I get that in the States, public information might be a little richer, or you would be able to buy statistical information that is more granular than it would have been in the EU because of confidentiality and personal information issues. However, in case this exercise is carried out in a European Union member state, would there be a possibility to make assumptions for some of the data based on your experience from the States, from missing data, let's say?
Yeah, there would be, because there's the majority of the data is there, and just because I don't necessarily know that Tom lives at 123 Main Street, that's okay. To your point, there's other attributes that we may be able to glean that aren't deemed PII, right? The important information. The one thing that is a little bit more challenging outside of the US that is a little bit of a blocker on the real estate side is it's called a multiple listing service, right? So essentially MLS is what it's called here, and essentially what that is a common database of all homes that are in fact on the market. Because essentially what you want to look at is the standardization of that data. That's the first thing, right? If you have all different data sources, you need to either build that standardization or get it. The second thing, as it relates to that service, the MLS service, that helps teach the algorithms what's going on. So it doesn't, in a sense, it doesn't necessarily do the predictions. It's all the attributes that I shared with you that is what we use. But once you build an algorithm, especially to do prediction, you have to train, they call it train it or teach it. So it uses real world data to go out and say, oh, I see what's going on in this particular postal code or whatever it might be. And I'm going to use that data to train my brain so that when I go and look at this raw data over here, I can predict an outcome based on what I see happening over here. And that's what's a little bit missing currently in some of the regions outside of the United States, is that the data does exist, but it's typically with the local governments as opposed to in a third-party service that's easily applicable. Not to say that it can't be done, though, because there are definitely data sources that are growing and becoming available. So this could have application in the near future.
Okay, got it. Okay, so let's talk about Enscope. What does Enscope look like? What is it?
So if you want, I can share my screen and we can go through. Great, let me do that. All right. So you should see a dashboard with some pretty trees and a house behind it. You see that?
Yes.
Great. So this view that we're looking at is actually a customer account. So it'll give you a real world of what we're doing. And so think about this as this particular person is a real estate agent. Our platform allows them to subscribe or participate in predictions in a specific area. And we go all the way down to a fractional postal code. So you can actually buy 1/3 of the predictions. We go that low, but essentially it's really postal code on up to multiple states. So when each month, on the 5th of each month, we take all the data, we run it through our processes, and out comes the predictions for that specific area that our user has subscribed to. So what you're seeing here is this particular client has been with us for about 3 months. So far, they've gotten almost 1,000 predictions. Over here is essentially just a small widget that shows them predictions, so guesses that we've made on homes that actually have happened. They have actually become listed. Not necessarily for this person, but in this particular area. And the notifications over here are just very quick hits as to what's going on in their world. So what is the most common profile? And we'll talk about that in a second. How many transactions took place? These are some of this data is public, but we aggregate it together to help give a view or tell a story, which you'll hear me use that term a lot. Because we as marketers and technologists, it's one thing to get a prediction. It's another thing to be able to tell a story with that prediction so that the sales associate can use attributes to go and have a conversation, right?
Before you
So
proceed, can I ask you a
yes,
question? So,
please.
essentially, this is a web-based
Web-based tool.
database.
Yes,
Somebody can log in and create an account. Do they need to
correct.
prove that they're a real estate agent, or is that not an important information?
Technically
Anybody can go in.
anyone could, correct, yes. And
Okay.
there is an e-commerce site we've built that goes along with this, so you can go and to a different URL, enter the zip codes you're curious about, get their data information, and essentially sign up and pay with a credit card.
Okay, great.
So what you see here, this particular subscriber is from Florida. We give both a visual and a data view, depending on what the sales associate's looking for. But if you take a look, we have an interactive map that allows the subscriber to very quickly see where our predictions are being made geographically, especially if they know their area. Zoom in on those predictions and see what type of prediction it might be, all the way down to a street view or a profile. So we can see, excuse me, this is a mature household, and we'll go into the definitions, but it shows you what type of predictions are actually being made. For other users, they may just be simply interested in the data. So we provide a data-only view that can be extracted out and put into their contact management system or the like to campaign. But if you take a look at the data that's here, let me just scroll up very quickly. So what you're looking at here is the predictions that were given to this subscriber for the month of May. So the detail, and we'll get into two different screens, this list view as well as the detail of it. You'll see that essentially every property or every prediction is first profiled so that, again, you know who is in that household, the address itself, who lives there. So this starts to get into some of that privacy information that, of course, wouldn't be there. If they're on a database here that's called Do Not Call, so whether you can call them or not, we have that information. We have their phone and their email information. So I don't want to make you dizzy. I'm going to go to a different view that's a little easier to take a look at, and that's this one here. So this will give you an understanding of the type of data that we use. Let me actually go to this one here. Yeah, type of data that we use to build a 360 view of a prospect or a prediction so that you can have that conversation. So you'll see that in this particular house, Mariah is actually the dominant person on the mortgage. We have her phone, and then we can see the rest of the members. What do they look like, right? How much money do they actually make? And someone may say, but why is that important? Well, especially in real estate, I can say, okay, well, this particular person makes about 180, but I can go and look at their mortgage and say, wow, they have about $200,000 in equity. It may be a conversation I want to have. Conversely, you can see that they have kids. They have one child who's between the ages of 13 and 15. Well, as a real estate agent, you may say, well, gosh, a couple more years, that child is going to go to university, which means they may downsize. So these are what we call triggers that not only our algorithm may use, but also the folks using our predictions can use to have these conversations. I'll pause for a second, but does that make sense?
Yes. This conclusion that you have come to based on the income and the number of kids and their ages, does somebody who is an experienced realtor come to this conclusion themselves looking at the data, or does Enscope indicate this somehow?
A little bit of both plus one. So a little bit of both means that generally speaking, most people do not have it. They will just simply download the list and market it without really giving a thought. But some of the other sales associates will actually say, you know what, I work better with retired couples or children, or I'm going to go after a certain attribute, and they will use that data. The last piece, though, that you asked is a very interesting one, and one we're actually working on right now, utilizing actually additional AI, or what's called generative AI, which I think we've talked about in the past. And what we're building is a small widget that will allow our users to have a conversation with the application. So essentially, I know this sounds crazy, but if you think about it, someone would be able to log in and not only learn very quickly how to use the application, but they'll be able to ask questions like, well, can you tell me, of all the predictions you gave me, who should I target first and why? And the AI bot will be able to come back and say, well, Monica, did you know that 25 people in your predictions have incredibly high equity? You may want to talk to them about a message that's that's selling for profit, right? So we're building in that generative AI on top, which is very, very popular these days, but it can be very, very powerful, I think, for our users in this tool.
Okay, and how about updating the data? Is this something that is updated automatically via the sources that you're using?
It is, yes. So it's literally an entirely separate application that powers this. So we have about 6 different data sources. All of them send us that raw data at various times throughout the month. We have an engine that basically then normalizes that information, puts it into a different holding bin, if you will. And then we have our algorithm application that runs through its multiple algorithms and then puts it in this application. So it's updated, that whole process runs every month.
Okay, perfect. Good.
One other thing I
Nice.
did want to show, and this is not the application, but it'll give some of our viewers an idea of what can be done. So some of these are shallow, but I think they're really interesting. So this is not our tool. This is a data tool. This is a data tool called Tableau. Anybody can buy it. What we've done is that whole process I just talked to you about, where we get the data and we refine it and we carry it. So our database has almost 6 years worth of data in it from all of the transactions that have taken place, all of the times we've run through that process. And we put this tool on top of it so that we can understand how are we doing? How is our tool performing for our subscribers? So what you're looking at, and we update that automatically each month. So every time we run for our subscribers, we pass that data over to this reporting tool that we built that will show how that data is performing. So for example, if I want to look at, these are the top 20 zip codes in the United States as it relates to the month of May, and looking backwards 12 months because it has to go through its maturity cycle. So I can see that it happens to be in a city called Clarksville, Tennessee. I can see that last year we gave about 7,100 predictions, and we got 897 of them correct, which is very good. That's actually 12.6% accuracy. So if you think about it, if you out of every 100 at a broad stroke, we got 12 and a half of them right, which is tremendous because anybody selling anything from a pencil to cars to homes, general prospecting is typically about a 1.5 to 2% accuracy rate.
Mm-hmm.
So in this case, let's use 2, say the person's very good, we're 6 times that. So that's really neat. The other interesting thing that you can do, let me just, because my screen's hidden here, is take a look at the duration from the time I gave the prediction to when it came true. So I'm going to look at that. I did that same view. I went to zip code and I went to the number 1, which again is Clarksville. So I can see here, same data, you can see 7,100, 12.6. But what's interesting is from the day I gave our subscribers the prediction on average, so think of a bell curve, 124 days is when it became likely, on average, those predictions came true. Whereas if I look over here in Minnesota, it was 228 days. So what's really cool is we can see the variance of how our algorithm's performing month on month, city, state, zip, and sort of get an understanding of how are we performing overall. And the reason why I want to show these is if you think about it, let's get away from real estate and just think of could be inventory, could be anything, and taking a look at forecasting. Now, if someone has this data, you can not only visualize it, now you can start to create strategy around it. So if I start to see things change, we may tweak our algorithms to perform slightly differently as a result of this. So it's input output.
Fantastic. We have talked about this topic many times, but and at the beginning of this conversation. So this is currently the situation in the US where there are many resales of residential properties being carried out. How would you adjust this model or this know-how, this predictive analytics know-how that you have in order to reflect a situation where you have a lot of real estate companies developing projects from the ground up and looking for potential buyers? So we're talking about something completely different, but something that could be aided by predictive analytics. In that case, what kind of data would be required from a company or the market in order to build something that would be useful for them to target potential buyers, either commercial or residential properties?
Well, I think it's very similar to the type of data that we're using. So I think, again, you first have to understand your build your universe, right? So that's going to be your data sources around just generally, what does that look like in terms of the commercial market, how many buildings are available, and so on, and then what does the physical structure look like, and what are the parameters of those structures. Second, you may, because commercial may have much more leasing, right? So you may want to look at things like leasing history for a particular property. Again, there'd be data points in there. And then similar to the members that live in a home, you may want to start to look, and again, I'm talking about commercial, you may want to look at previous buyers and what those profiles look like. They may be companies at that point. So it's not that different. I think with anything, you really just want to almost take the technology out of it and look at what are you trying to answer? What are you trying to solve? And then break it down very simplistically into buckets. And then from there, you would go in, because oftentimes, I don't want to simplify algorithms because they're obviously extremely important and extremely complicated, but oftentimes I think people let the technology mystify them versus saying, how would I logically think? Like, what would I do? And you asked a question earlier with experienced real estate agents, would they know some of this stuff? Well, they actually would know a lot of it. They just might not know how to put it together, which is where the technology comes into play.
And of course, technology is always an enabler and not, being bought or implemented just because it's something cool or something trendy. It's a means to an end usually.
Yes, and it breaks, and it breaks.
Yes.
But you are right. It's a medium and not a solution.
I think at this part of the world, and I'm based in Cyprus, there is a lot of development going on, and the same goes for Greece, Romania, Bulgaria. So the real estate sector is quite important, and of course, finding buyers for your new property is always tricky, but I believe that most real estate companies are companies that have done it for a number of times. So they do have a lot of data on what their potential buyers are, depending on what kind of property they are developing. So that's two data sets there that could be used to draw some conclusions. And then, of course, we have the market data that can always be sourced from town planning authorities, local authorities, or any other statistical services that might provide this information. So in combination, let's say, this data could be used in order to form some kind of basis, historical data in combination with market data, and then based on your experience from the US and what you have in your databases, perhaps there could be some assumptions that can be carried out for the missing data in order to complement and test this solution in this part of the world.
It would. And actually, very quickly, and I apologize for not clicking it before, this particular module is conveniently named buyer locator. So this is the type of, these are some of the, let me use mine. this is the beginnings of sort of what you were talking about, data being adapted. This is all more or less anonymous and not individualized, but this can help companies. The idea here is to help our subscribers identify who may be buying their home. So we're focused on selling, right, or finding the sellers. But once you get the seller to sign a contract, well, now you need a buyer. So what I did is I happened to put my zip code in here. This starts to give you some of the data that may be available anywhere, not just the U.S. But these are things like where do they spend their time online, how much money do they make as a whole, things of that nature. You can also the important thing again here in the States we use is the census. Right? What are the actual migration patterns? So, you can even build maps, heat maps around where, so I just typed my zip code in, for example, all these icons essentially are rerun through an algorithm on our side that will sort of color indicate the likelihood of the profile. So people that live in 08057, which is my zip code, if you take a look at, let's say, this one here, which is Cherry Hill, the 08034, that buyer match, so the people that live in there, they're almost a 70% match. So it might be an area you want to market. But all this data is again, you can start to amass. It's all about creating that story and telling that story around what you're trying to get to.
And of course, now that you have shared your screen, and I go back to what you said at the beginning, that this could be also of interest in addition to real estate companies, which is, of course, the main beneficiary of this type of information. Banks and insurance companies could benefit from having this type of information.
It would, and we have actually spoken to come. It is absolutely, because again, think of the migration pattern: people buying and selling. These are transactions that take place. Everyone has insurance. A lot of people have mortgages. Things like that. All the way down to purchasing cars. Right? You could make the leap, right? But economic indicators are really what it's coming down to, because you can start to look at those indicators to understand potential behavior, right? Especially if you start to look at some of the things of where you're getting your data sources, where are people browsing, what are they looking at, what are their interests. You could get crazy. You could go all the way down and say, give me, look at the top profiles of people who like wine. I don't know what you're going to predict there, but you could, right? That data is available for you to acquire.
And just to add something there, so from a marketer's perspective, all the data that could be potentially available, whether it's anonymized, so you're doing segment-based targeting, or you have information that's more specific and more granular to an individual or household, you can then tweak, especially if you're doing any multivariate type messaging, where you're tweaking the message either based on a segment profile or based on smaller nuances, where you can start to tweak language, start to tweak imagery, use of imagery, offers, things along those lines, and then better track those, because you do have access to all this data. And then, like Tom said, you could always tweak on how you want to pull the list, how you want to leverage that data, regardless of the service, if it's real estate based or if it's something related to home improvement, something related to needing additional whether it's expanding my credit card because I need the ability to do some home improvements before I can actually list the house, or now I am getting ready to move. So how do I package things up, movers, things along those lines? There's tons of different applications that could be leveraged from this. But the big thing is, if you just remove real estate from this, we're just talking large amounts of data, telling a visual story, packaging that up, leveraging AI and machine learning to really predict different outcomes, and that same approach could be leveraged for any vertical, not just for real estate, and not just necessarily based on home-based data.
Right.
And actually, hearing you say this, it comes to my mind that it should be very interesting for utilities or any other type of government services to know where people are migrating to, where they're buying, where they're selling for planning purposes, and that is an issue that that we are facing in Cyprus at the moment. That the population is growing very rapidly, especially in the city centers. However, the infrastructure is not growing at the same pace, or it's not being developed at the same pace. But it does pay to look at the data and the visualizations, as you say, in order to plan correctly.
Absolutely.
And you also touched upon the topic of personalization of services, and that's really important. I would say that beyond the real estate companies, as we said before, banks, insurance companies, movers, the ability to be able to the ability to develop services that speak to somebody and not just be generic. I think it's something that is not only nice, it's a must-have now, and there is no turning back. I think this is the new trend, and this is going to be like this from now on. People do need personalization. They do not want to receive any generic messages that do not apply to them.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So if you just look at just the mover market, which obviously the state is focused on, a lot of companies where they fail is retention-based services based on a move, right? So say I am a home heating oil company or utility or cable company offering video or high-speed internet services to a household. If that house then moves, but it stays within the footprint of my service offering, I want to retain that customer. I don't want to put that customer at risk because when I disconnect my service at one location and go to another location, I invite the opportunity for other competitors to now sign me up for services, right? So what can I do to get ahead of that? So a move predictor really enables those sort of organizations to be like, okay, this household may potentially move at some point, or is likely to take some sort of action along those lines. So let me make sure that I'm maintaining that relationship. And then if that decision is made, I provide services, white glove treatment or whatever, to help transition those services to them so it is smooth. It doesn't always have to be I have to give a discount or something along those lines, but just make it hassle-free so I can unplug and plug. I can get my delivery services change, my lawn care change from this address to that address, and maintain perhaps what I was grandfathered in at the prior location, et cetera. So there's lots of side opportunities related to something like this. But again, you're just getting back to how could I leverage lots of data and then figure out where there may be multiple uses of that, and then hitting each of those verticals to have them leverage it.
Yep.
Could you also use crowdsourced data? Could you give an incentive to people to give you their data to be used anonymously on a platform? Have you done this before at all, or have you not needed to?
You can do that. So there's the feedback loop, which is always important, and we do that on every prediction. But where you're going is something we have been asked, is to not only give me, in this particular example, give me predictions, but you know what, give you or upload your contacts and let us run our algorithm on yours, and we are going to start allowing that. But yes, that's something that you can do as well.
Okay. Could you talk to us a little bit more about just a couple of minutes about the technology and what is in the back of what we are seeing?
So yes, I can. Here, and I'll come off share so you can see. So I think that's a really important piece, especially when you're dealing with this size of data, as well as quite frankly, the data points that are in there. So we've chosen a cloud provider for this. So we partnered with Amazon. The architecture from those that are watching that are very technical, we use a completely serverless architecture. So the entire system runs on something called microservices. So if you think about it, every feature, every facet in this application has its own little application. It's its own little service. It makes it very, very scalable. And it allows us to deploy a lot more instances very quickly. We are also using, I would say, non-conventional or structuralist databases that allow for very, very large data sets. So the names of those may fall on deaf ears, but essentially we utilize very large scale databases as well as coding languages like Python and things of that nature that allow for very, very rapid execution of the different technologies. But I would say the biggest thing is to ensure high security, high availability, and high scale, right? So if you have thousands of people coming in, or if you're running, very big processes. So there's 181 million homes in the United States. If we're processing that times 300 columns of data against everything, that's quite a lot of computations. So the application has to be able to scale up and down on its own. So when we built the architecture, we had that in mind so that you can expand and contrast as you need it versus legacy or years past. You would typically have to say, how big could this be? Let me build a finite structure to start and then hope for the best and then just keep adding to it. Where if you think of this, it's sort of, in a sense, sometimes self-scaling, where it can spike up on its own and scale down on its own.
Okay. And with regards to integrations, is this what you referred to before as being asked about from real estate agents to integrate their own data into the platform and have them analyzed by Enscope? Is that what you meant when you mentioned that?
Yes, it is. So we can allow people to just simply upload a comma delimited file because most people understand what that is. They don't have to do programmatic integration. But for some of our customers who are on the larger scale, we allow them to interface with our program via API.
Okay.
So
And
that's more of a programmatic way.
And what is the benefit to them? Why would somebody need that?
So the benefit to them would be more of a larger scale integration. So they may want to not use any of these screens at all. They want our predictions, they want the data, but they want to pull it in on their own terms into their own systems and perhaps even merge their data with our data. You're not going to do that manually. It would be a bit of a pain in the butt, especially with how frequent our data changes. So you create a communication layer so the two applications can talk to one another. So that would be more your larger, and it would also likely be even sometimes outside, like we're talking other verticals, other sectors. The API would more likely be very common with that.
Okay, so they're using Enscope as data as a service rather than a tool for them to log in and use it.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, so pull it into their CRM tools or use it with any dialers that they have. If they have internal sales associates that are doing outbound, telemarketing and so forth for them. So it's existing legacy or third-party applications that they use as part of their day-to-day. But they obviously want the value of the lists that we provide, the predictions we provide, and then all the data that comes along with it. But like Tom said, if I'm established in a particular area, I may have relationships. I may have sold homes for individuals in the past, but it's been a number of years. And if a listing comes across and they're able to see, well, I have a relationship with this individual, now I can more easily access my history with that household or that owner. And the combination of, those two data sets, you have our prediction and all the updated information that we have available to them, along with whatever you had in regards to the last transaction, who was the agent that worked on it, so that you may, be able to leverage any of your local knowledge or local relationships as part of that.
Good. And for the last part of this conversation, I wanted to focus on how would somebody need to start in order to do something similar to Enscope for their own company? Because, okay, you can either have something that is available for the whole market, i.e. develop it as a solution like you have done with Enscope, or a company might choose to leverage this know-how in the technology in order to have something internally. For the latter, where would somebody start? What is maybe the time frame that is needed for the development? I mean, we talked about the lack of data or the need rather to identify data. what would be the process from technology, from the technology side?
I think the biggest thing is your data analysis first, right? So aside from understanding what the problem you're trying to solve is, the next would be gathering that data, right? And doing a gap analysis to understand what I have and versus what I need, and then procuring obviously that what I need part. Then from there start to map out how is it going to be used, right? Is it just simply a data visualization like the charts and stuff that I show? In which case is very similar to what you would do on the business side, right? You have to do an analysis of what you have, understanding of what data you have and what you don't, then process map out the flows. As I was mentioning, is it just a data visualization tool? Because if it is, once you set up your basic structure, the tech is really just how to power that structure. So you got to build your engine that it's often called an ETL, extract, transact, load, right? Which basically means I get the data, I transact the data, and then I load the data in, right? And then, of course, write your algorithms. So you talked a little bit about timing. It's not a short timeline. It can be from a rapid perspective, but just to give you an idea of just the first generation of Nscope, it took well over a year to build. It's not a I mean, there's tons of competitors to what we do, and I've talked to some folks here in the States. I've even talked to some larger companies. Not just that you can't build it on your own, because you absolutely can. But the one thing that goes without technology, or goes with technology, is the knowledge that you gain from building your solution. So we're almost 6 years in now with this. We're on our third iteration of the platform and the algorithms. So you think about the knowledge that we've sort of taken away and learned. That's probably the biggest gap that I would say, that don't underestimate it, right? Either hire someone who understands, whether they're an employee or not, hire someone who understands and who's done it, unless you want to elongate your time frame.
Yep. Great. Fantastic. I think we have completed the conversation.
Excellent.
Even despite the short interruption. So thank you very much, Adon. I think that we have covered the topic from a very broad perspective. Of course, if anybody has any questions or needs to talk to us more specifically about their own case, we are happy to do it. We are available either for a face-to-face or an online meeting. And yeah, we're always happy to explore even new applications. I think this is something that is a given now. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you all for watching, and have a nice rest of the day. Have a nice evening.
Take care. Bye.
Bye-bye.